a lot going on in D.C. right now, and the fight against the deep state, a bunch of judges putting universal injunctions against Trump moves. We're going to dive into this. But first, the media fascinated with one member of Doge in particular, the fellow known as, well, Play 2.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. We begin tonight with Musk and Big Balls.
Big Balls.
Big Balls.
A 19-year-old that goes by the username Big Balls.
Big Balls, who worked for Elon Musk's so-called Department of Government Efficiency, Doge.
The Big Balls kid, a literal teenager.
Big Balls. Big Balls here. So that would be one way that we could refer to him.
Young computer whizzes, the aforementioned Big Balls.
Because who among us doesn't feel better about big balls, big balls, big balls, big B-A-L-L-S. That's what he calls himself, in charge of American air traffic control.
Now, they are saying it. First of all, he's not in charge of American air traffic control, but put that aside. The lies now, what you're seeing is they don't actually have arguments against a lot of this stuff, so they're just going to lie about everything. I will start to pick apart some of those lies here momentarily. But they think, it reminds me a little bit, Clay, of Trump running in 2016. They think talking about this is mockery that will turn people against the Doge team. They don't understand that vibe shift, as we have discussed, where the culture is increasingly with Trump, with Elon, with this team of mavericks, if you will, this sort of non-traditional look at the government waste and abuse. Because here's an example of what Elon, Doge, and Mr. Big Balls are looking at. Elon tweeted this out. Doge canceled a $17 million project by the U.S. government to provide tax policy advice to Liberia. We're sending $17 million, but, $17 million to Liberia to help them with tax. Do we think anyone is actually helped by this advice? I mean, if they have the internet in Liberia, can't they look up tax advice there? Why are we doing this? We're just in a place where the deep state, the forever government, the bureaucracy lights money on fire with impunity and thinks that they're the good guys for doing it. Clay, the New York Times has $40 million of subscriptions paid for by government. You want to know how the left wing, why is it that we have like a few things in conservative media, which, by the way, are very profitable, right? Like, you talk about talk radio, Fox News, like these are businesses that have sustained themselves, or like we all know, right? I mean, this is capitalism working. And yet on the left, it's like NPR, ABC News, CBS News, NBC, you go through all these things. Well, if you can get government employees by the hundreds of thousands to have the government's money paying for your subscription, that's a pretty big advantage, don't you think?
It's monstrously huge. And I'm just out. I was stunned by this. And I come from the media universe, Buck, where I've had to do ad sales. It is so hard to do $1 million in ad revenue. I mean, a lot of your local shows that you are listening to in conjunction with this show premiere, a lot of your local affiliate shows, they will bust their ass to get $1 million in total revenue in all of these different local markets all over the country. I remember, Buck, both selling individual ads to fund Outkick, but I also remember the local sports talk radio show that I did when we hit $1.5 million in ad revenue. Like, we were super excited about how successful that show
That's a successful business. That's a hard milestone to look. I remember the first $5,000 of ad revenue I sold on my podcast like 14 years ago. I was like, $5,000, woohoo!
I went out and did all of these pitches and everything else, and I understand most people don't really know the media business, but to have tens of millions of dollars of mine and your taxpayer money going to subsidized left-wing content is bonkers. And I just want to hit you with this. Think about it. I think this is a talking point that should be slammed home more frequently. How would the media cover it if there were a $20,000 a year Fox News product that all of the Trump administration was paying tens of millions of dollars of taxpayer dollars a year to support? Because people out there are like, well, that's just what Politico Pro cost. $20,000 a year? I'm sorry.
I've never paid $20,000 a year for anything as a subscription in my life. I have no idea. This is insane. Clay.
A subscription. My first house was $70,000. I mean, like the idea that you would pay $20K to get a freaking email password for an article is bonkers to me.
Also, why is that a legitimate expenditure of? Because what they say is like, yeah, that's just the price, and we know that. Here's the thing, everybody. Their arguments are trash. The people that are trying to argue against what Elon and the Trump administration are doing right now, their arguments are garbage. So they're just going to start. Now they're talking about Elon has access to too much personal information. Elon works on rocket ships and has a TS clearance and is better at what's going on and has more influence on what's happening in outer space than NASA by a factor of 100. Okay, it's not even close. That Elon can't be trusted. Elon was an original founder at PayPal where they had access to everyone's banking information. I mean, this guy's track record of not giving a you-know-what about random people's social security numbers and like personal data, their arguments against what he's doing are insane. These are arguments for people that don't live in reality. And it's because when we look at this, Clay, you say, hold on. Why is the government? Why, if you're sitting in the Commerce Department, why are taxpayer dollars via Commerce paying for your New York Times subscription? Pay for your own damn New York Times subscription. What is this?
I would look. I pay for all my subscriptions now. I don't work for the government, but I would be embarrassed to ask iHeart to pay for my.
I've never had an employer pay for a newspaper subscription. That's on me.
Wouldn't you be embarrassed to even ask?
Yes, absolutely.
And I would feel the same way about asking Fox to pay for my subscriptions to, Washington Post or whatever else.
Why shouldn't all these bureaucrats have the federal government paying for their cable bill? There's news channels.
Yeah, I can't even imagine the thought process. You're just using the government like a trough of cash to be signing up for these things. Like, I would be humiliated and embarrassed if I worked at a government office. And for people to try to defend this, again, I'm looking at it from the perspective of someone who has done media and had to do ad sales. It's hard to get $1 million. When we're talking about tens of millions of dollars going to these companies, that's not very different from all of these left-wing organizations basically paying and subsidizing all the reporting that they want to go after their adversaries. It's like they're retaining their own independent news media.
That's right.
And independent is in a quotation mark because they want them to throw. And this is so important, Buck, and I feel like we could do a whole show on this. The laundering of stories through the media to then justify using them to attack your political opponents. Look, if Chuck Schumer wants to argue that Pete Hegseth doesn't deserve to be defense secretary, and he wants to lay out the reasons why, that's at least above board. And I'm just using Chuck Schumer because he's a Senate majority or a Senate minority leader. If he gets ProPublica or the Washington Post or the New York Times to publish an attack piece so that he can then use it to try to argue against Pete Hegseth, that's dishonest. It's laundering dirty information through your media allies and then claiming that these independent journalists have just raised this story. It's so dirty, and it's actually the foundation of American politics right now.
Well, it's also Russia collusion, right? The whole Russia collusion thing was you had people in the FBI as sources for the media, and then the FBI people for warrants for FISA, which I remember when I was a CIA, and like anything that had to do with FISA information was treated as, oh, this is a very powerful tool and everyone has to be very, above board and it's all audited and everything else. The FBI feeds the media stories to attack the people they don't like in politics, and then the FBI in official documents goes, well, look at what they said at the Associated Press. I'm going to cite that for the warrant. I mean, the whole thing, like I say, it is the ultimate self-licking ice cream cone. And for anyone who's, by the way, we're going to have to, their arguments against this are all garbage. And so it's just going to be just constant lies, constant misdirection. They cannot take these things on. To say, for example, that they do not believe that this money matters because it's not enough, every dollar, when you file your taxes, does every dollar matter? Oh, you're darn right it is. You and I have talked about this. I got a demand for like an extra $100 one year, and I wasn't making much money at the time from the IRS. Every dollar matters when it comes to the government taking money from you, but every dollar doesn't count when it comes to what the government is spending. That's outrageous. That's unacceptable. And it goes to the mentality that has become pervasive in D.C., which is that the government is here forever. You know, the Republicans can elect some clown here or there to be, quote, president and have a cabinet, but really the government governs no matter what. Clay, that has to stop. That mentality is what we are fighting.
Yeah, and I mean, in your own family, if you found out that you were paying 20% of your bills for fraudulent, not what you were paying for aspects of your life, would you be like, well, it's only 20%? Or would you acknowledge, hey, this is significant? I mean, we just talked about the fact, Buck, you're getting in shape with the baby coming. It's like saying, well, for anybody out there that's 100 pounds overweight, well, it's only 5 pounds. Well, you can't address the corpus of your overweight aspect unless you start somewhere, right? I mean, I fundamentally reject the idea of, oh, it's only 2% of spending. Oh, it's only 4% of spending. If it's wasted money and it's our money and it's fraud, why in the world should we just pretend that it's okay or acceptable to have any element of
And I
fraud
can tell you
embedded in our tax spending?
The mentality of a weight loss and fitness journey, to the degree I'm able to speak about this, to maybe eventually I'll put some progress pics online. You guys will be impressed. Progress has been good. But from that perspective and the government spending issue, it really is about how you treat everything and what you're willing to address, and do you have a sense of what is going on? Meaning, do you even know what's happening? Do you even know who's getting this money? Do you even know how much money is being spent? Do you even know what's happening to the money that we're giving to the people that are supposed to be spending it? Same thing with how many steps a day are you getting? How many calories are you eating? How much protein are you getting? Like, if you don't know these things, you can't fix it. And I know it's taking, individual diet and taking it to the multi-trillion-dollar federal government, but the basic principles are the same. And I think Elon would agree with that, by the way, which is why when he says they're now going to go and, they're auditing a whole range of federal institutions, and they're going to go audit Social Security. What are the Democrats saying? He wants to take away your Social Security. No, that is a lie. Elon just wants to not have Social Security writing $100 billion of fraudulent government taxpayer checks a year. How about that? Who's not on board with that?
Yeah, and again, I think it's really important to, when we come back, do you see Mark Cuban, who's now upset at Elon and Trump and everybody? You're not going to be surprised, Buck. Do you know what he did just a few years ago? Say 30% of the government's probably fraud and waste, and we should cut it. And now, because he voted for Kamala, he's suddenly come back around. The guy's brain's broken. We'll play some audio with you of that. Unfortunately, Buck, we have lost. You and I, big losers on our Prize Picks picks. We won the free square. That's good because it's impossible.
I did say
to lose
the Eagles would
square.
win. We did unfortunately put no money on that, though. So,
but Juju Smith-Schuster, by a half point, went
brutal.
over his receiving yards. And then Saquon didn't score. He got close, had a couple of close opportunities. He didn't get into the end zone. And Travis Kelce was a no-show in the first half. So we lost. We took it on the chin.
We kind of got smoked, but we tried.
We did get smoked. In fact, you would have done better if you had baited us and took the exact opposite side of our picks. But you can still download the app today. And maybe you think we're morons, and today that would be accurate. And you want to take the opposite of us. You get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. You can play in Texas. You can play in Georgia. You can play in California. March Madness, getting close now. Very close. And you want to get hooked up right now. PrizePicks.com. My name, Clay. $50 instantly. That's PrizePicks.com. Go sign up today. Code Clay.